Okay. So I hope everyone has had a great day at day one of our 2019 Community Engagement Conference. I'm Kate Barter. I am the co-director of our new Sustainability Institute. You all met my colleague and partner, Alina Irwin, at lunch, and I'm the other half of the Kate and Alina show, I guess we could call it. I am really pleased to be able to introduce our keynote speaker today, Ibrahim Abdul-Matin. And I want to read, I wish I had written this, but I read this sentence about Ibrahim, and I think it probably captures what we're about to hear very clearly. Ibrahim is a bright, playful spirit who authentically reflects and acts on bold questions. Now, I read this, you know, the magic of Google gives us instant access to so many things, and I thought, that sounds like someone who would be fascinating to speak at our conference on building sustainable and resilient communities. And when we dug a little bit deeper, found that Ibrahim has a long, deep history in environmental policy, community engagement, and probably just as importantly here at The Ohio State University, sports. He might have only known Ohio State for its football tradition I love, he said to me just a few moments ago that he was that weird football player in high school who was also in all the school plays. What another great description of a human being. I knew I would like him immediately when he said that. So Ibrahim has had some really, really interesting jobs and life experiences. He has been, I think he's a born, raised, diehard New Yorker. Although when he found out how easy it is to fly into Columbus, Ohio, I think he's thinking about changing his destination. He worked for the Department of Environmental Protection in New York as a community affairs director, and he was Mayor Bloomberg's sustainability policy advisor. And you know, every time I'm in New York City, I'm kind of overwhelmed and impressed by the infrastructure and what it takes to run that city, and the commitment of people like Mayor Bloomberg to environmental and sustainability challenges is something I have so long admired. I was thrilled that he agreed to come be our keynote speaker today. So I know that Ibrahim is a prolific writer, thinker. He's a published author. He shows up in lots of interesting places. And I know he's going to bring to all of us a really interesting view about the importance of diversity and inclusion, about the importance of bringing together different audiences and people from all backgrounds, and how important community engagement is, because that's really what this event is all about. How can we better engage in our communities to build the future we all want to see? So thank you very much, and Ibrahim, the floor is yours.
So obviously I want to say thank you. That was a really warm introduction. And thank you for those who've stayed. You stayed and you were like, I'm going to hear from this person. I don't have any clue who he is, so that's impressive. I am a New Yorker. Is anyone else here a New Yorker? We're sort of obsessed with ourselves. It's kind of a thing. But I'll give you respect because, you know, the Ohio State University wins national championships. We don't have those in New York. The closest we have is, you know, the bastard stepchild of the Big Ten, which is Rutgers. And you know what happens every time you guys play Rutgers. It's not nice, actually. It's really not nice. You shouldn't do that to a team. So first of all, thank you. I wanted this, hopefully the conversation's gonna feel somewhat like, you know, it's like, let's say it's like 10 degrees outside. It's not 10 degrees outside, but let's say it feels like 10 degrees outside and we have the fireplace going and we're all just sort of chilling out. We ate a lot earlier and we went to the bathroom, so we're fine now. And we're just laying out on the couch. The rug is cozy. Our feet feel nice and warm. We're just kind of kicking back. and the night is long, the snow is falling, and we're amongst friends and family, because everyone in this room right now is a person who works in the same field around connecting people and connecting the community with the work that we're doing with institutions. So that's the way I feel about this conversation. I was so happy to be invited to this conference because I've worked in lots of different offices in different ways, but I've always worked at this intersection between what is the organization or the institution and how are we relating to the community that we're working with, the stakeholders in the community. And I've written a book and I've done other things, but I've never been asked to talk about that specific area. So I'm really, really honored and inspired to do that. So yeah, let's get started. So first of all, I want to say thank you again. The people in the room, I'm assuming, and you could just give a hoot when you hear your thing. The folks from the university extension personnel, where are y'all? There we go. The people at the county offices and also people here, so God bless all of y'all. Faculty and staff from the Ohio State University. That was a little less enthusiastic. Are you guys counting the days to your retirement or what's going on here? No specific pun intended. And then, of course, students. Any students here? There we go. So let's just break that down a bit. Undergrad? Oh, okay. All right, respect. Grad students? She's like, yes. There we go. And obviously, finally, but not least, probably most importantly, community folks, people from the city of Columbus. First of all, and then let's just do this to round out this roll call. How many people here, just so I know, just to understand this, how many people are born and raised Columbus, Ohio? There we go. I want to hear like a rock. No, I'm just joking. So thank you for allowing me into your city, into your town. I just want to give you, and for those of you who understand how crazy New York City is, I went to the airport extra early this morning because I was concerned because of the government shutdown, which I think is an amazing idea. Let's just shut down the government. And there was no line. And I think the guy in front of me, he reeked of marijuana, and they just let him walk through. I'm not even joking. And then it was like this old man, white guy with gray hair, and they were checking his stuff. I'm like, what's happening here? Things are a little skewed differently. So this is, thank you, Trump. I appreciate it. I appreciate the easy walk through. And I also want to give a lot of respect and props to the people who've spent all the countless hours. Jared, for all your effort and all your hard work. Let's give him a round of applause. The diligence, the thoughtfulness, the patience, I appreciate all of that. And also everybody else who's here, the sound people, I can't see you, but you're the magicians that are behind us. Anybody who, if you've ever been a part of producing an event or producing a show or a concert, there's a lot of effort that goes into the back end. A lot of moving wires and plugging things in and testing things out. So just for a moment, indulge me and just give all the tech staff and all the support staff a round of applause. And also, just for your own sake, I know there's a million other places you could be. I mean, some of you have little kids and children. I know this is a break, so that's cool. And others of you are, you could be home, you could be any other place. But right now, you're here. And I want to give you a little context, too. I'm Muslim. I'm a Muslim American. And one of the things that in Islam, we talk about that human beings, our souls, were literally all together in one place at the beginning of time. And that God told us some stuff. I'm not going to get into what he said. It's top secret stuff. No, it's not top secret. But God sort of spoke to all of us at that one place. But the important thing I want to mention is that in that time, our souls were next to other souls. And at different points in your life, you meet those souls again in life. So I would like to think that all of us here are soulmates of sorts. That we've all arrived here together because we're thinking about the common good. We're thinking about how to make the world better. We're thinking about from our best self and our higher self. Maybe we were all hanging out, listening to God. And that's a really cool thought. So you're all soulmates of mine. Not like the other kind of soulmate, but like the heart soulmate, the soulmate. So I want to just give you a little bit of context about me. That's where I'm from. I argue that it's the greatest city on the planet Earth. You may disagree with me. That's okay. You're wrong. It's fine. It's incredibly diverse place. I want to give you this context, though. And this is a context that you should have about every place that you are. That island that you see there was called Mannahatta. The Lenape were the people who lived on that island before it was colonized by the Europeans. Lenape, in the language of the people, the native community that existed from mid-New England all the way down to sort of Chesapeake Bay, the Lenape language means the ancient ones. And all of those people from all around that area, all of the native people, would send their children and their young people to learn how to fish and how to hunt, and all of them spent some time with the ancient ones in New York. On that island, which was hilly, when the European settlers came for the first time, they said everywhere they walked around, there were bubbling streams and water. There were bubbling springs of water coming from the ground. So if you could imagine Manhattan Island, where everywhere, and they said there was a chorus of birds constantly flying overhead. The edges of it, if you look at the edges, are very rigid, but the edges were originally soft, marshland. That marshland were the nurseries for the sea. We've done lots of terrible things to the natural world, but the core of that is still there. It's still a place of creation and development. It's still a place of vibrancy and energy. That's New York. Now, my question to you is, in each of your locations, and throughout this conversation, I'm going to just give you sort of like things to think about or directives. I'm going to kind of just give you a to-do list. So if you're not writing things down, I'm a little concerned. But if you are, if you are writing things down, this is one of those things. Think about the natural world where you live in your community right now. What happened before you were there? What happened before the people before you were there? Can you tap into that energy? My argument is that if you tap into that energy, you're going to find that it's very similar to the energy that exists today. That we resonate with what the natural world resonates with. And that if you do tap into that, you can reach out to human beings in a much more meaningful way. Because you're not just coming at them, you're coming with them. You're bringing them together with you to understand the sort of murmur of the natural world, the sounds, the smells, the sights, the vistas. Those are the things that just capture your heart. And most of the time, when you connect with the natural world, with human beings, you connect with human beings in a deeper way. So I would tell you, if you're going to have a contentious meeting, have a hike before the meeting. If you're going to have a teaching or a roundtable discussion, and it's nice outside, go outside. Sit in a circle. If you're with your class, go into the quad and take off your shoes and tell them to put their feet in the grass. We do not touch our bodies to the earth enough, and we need to do that way more than we do. For decades upon decades, we've said, let's disconnect from our agrarian past. But there's so much that we can gain from just literally putting our bare feet on the grass and feeling it and understanding it. Maybe not right now, but you could do it in a couple months. I'm also a guy who used to hit people for a living. That's the way I used to describe it, is that I was a football player. And I want to give you guys two stories about that. Do you guys mind? I'm just checking in. Every now and then I'm going to check in. I'll give you that context because in New York City, in other places, you just get up in a stand and people like cheer for you. In New York City, they're like, what do you got? So I'm just checking in, make sure we're all on the same page right now. So we're still good right now? Okay, great. So my mother and father became Muslim, took Shahada, which means they declared their faith to become Muslim, after they had joined what was called the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam was a very important vehicle for African Americans because it took a lot of them and transitioned them from bad diets and misinformation about themselves and helped him understand that they had value. And so for my father, whose father had died when he was 11, it helped anchor him in the community and helped straighten up his back. He always tells me a story of running around out there, and they used to like steal cars in Queens and joyride them and bring them to Manhattan and just leave them. But then after he joined the nation, they didn't do stuff like that anymore, right? They were focused. So my mother and father met when they were in the Nation of Islam, and then as they started to transition, they transitioned into what's called Sunni Islam, or a more traditional version of Islam, which is more normalized in the world. And I give you that context because there was a group of people, just like in every other place in the United States, that were leaving the city because the city was difficult. So like there were all these hippie communities that were moving to the, living off the land. There were also black Muslim hippie communities doing the same thing, just FYI. And I was one of those kids that we went upstate New York, and we lived out in the woods. And so I had this amazing experience living out in the country. Now, one of the things that happens when are you guys still with me? Just checking? Great. One of the things that happens when you're out in the country is that you have a lot of chores to do, right? So the number one way I could get out of doing chores was by playing sports. So my dad said, if you go play football. And then he said, if you play football, I'm not going to bring you to practice, and I'm not going to wash your uniform. You got to figure that all out. So just imagine 8-year-old me on my bike, riding to the local place to play football, to play in my thing. I didn't even really like it at that point. It was just a way to get out of doing chores. But I'm going to tell you something very serious right now. Until I lived in Sydney until I went to Troy, New York, and so until like middle of high school. But from the age of 9 until the age of about 15, I played football. Every single game that I played, someone called me nigger. Every single game. Sometimes multiple times a game. And once in practice, this kid named Greg on my team called me a nigger in practice. And I remember I was standing there surrounded by all my teammates. And it was like something out of a weird Looney Tunes thing or something. Because one guy over here is saying, oh, he didn't mean it. Don't worry about it. Another guy over here saying, beat him up. Go get him. And I'm just sitting there like, what am I going to do? What would you do? Seriously, what would you do? My thought was like, okay, he did mean it. He said it. Over here, if I fight now, I'm going to have to fight for the rest of my life. I don't want to fight for the rest of my life. I'm going to have to fight in other ways anyway. So what I did was what any good kid who grew up listening to Eddie Murphy did. I just told him off, right? I just read him down. And what I said to him was, you're just mad at me because I took your position. You're never going to play football in this town again. I destroyed him. I felt terrible about it. Second thing, and I'm going to connect these two. You guys still with me? Great. So I went to the University of Rhode Island. I had a football scholarship. It was really awesome. My dad had told me and my brother that he couldn't pay for us to go to school. He has 6 children, so he was going to pay for his daughters to go to school. But the older boys, this is the downside of patriarchy, that we were on our own. We had to figure it out. So I was like, okay, let me figure this out. My brother got a track scholarship. He went to Bucknell University, and then he went to MIT, and he got his PhD there. He's a smart guy. I wasn't so smart, but I was okay. I like to read a lot. I got a football scholarship to the University of Rhode Island. In the very first couple of weeks at URI, there was this kid named John who had a swastika tattooed on his arm. And I remember we were like talking about him in the locker room, and they were like one day, and they were like, Eve, you gotta go talk to him. You go talk to him. So I walked into the dorm room, and I was like, so John, and he's like, what? It's like, at the time I was still a running back. So I was like, John, you're an offensive lineman, I'm a running back. We want to win. We got to figure this out. I know you got a swastika tattooed on you, and I know you don't like black people. I don't actually care about that. I just care about winning. So let's figure this out. And I tell you both of those stories because in both of those moments, it sounds terrible, right? Do you agree or no? You don't agree? You do. It sounds terrible. Like terrible situations. The most incredible thing is that in the era of Obama, that guy John reached out to me through Facebook, and he was like, "Ebe, how you doing?" I'm like, "Oh no, I'm on Facebook." I'm like, "Hi, John, how are you? How's it going? Nice to be back in touch." You know, we're just having this like dancing around. What are you up to? What are you up to? And finally, I was like, "All right, John, who are you voting for, John?" And he said, "I'm voting for Barack Obama." I was like, "What?" A lot changes. Years later, me and my wife were going up to see a game at Sydney, where I had lived upstate New York. And I'm talking to the coaches and talking to the players, and this kid taps me on the shoulder. It's that kid, Greg. I was like, "Greg, how you doing?" And he just gave me a hug. He just gave me a hug. He didn't say anything else. We both knew. His wife was black. He married a black woman. So I'm saying this to you now is that you might be in situations where people are not listening to you. You might be in situations where you might think that that person is the enemy or that person is your opposition. Don't be so mean, or don't be so quick to destroy them, to dismiss them. Because you and them might be closer than you think. You might be right on the edge. And the universe has brought you together for a reason, to really transcend that particular moment. So I wanted you to get a sense of who I am through that a little bit. I will say that I'm also a poet. If you had met me in 1999, I would have said I'm a poet. You'd be like, "What do you do for a living?" I'm like, "I'm just a poet." I would be walking around. These days, I'm a father. I have a son. I have 3 sons. One is 7, 5, and 2. But I think mostly what I tell people right now is that I'm a translator. And what is a translator? Oh, I wanted to show you guys this. I made my pilgrimage to Mecca this year. And I want to give you context on that. I have to share this idea. This is the largest gathering of human beings, the largest, most diverse gathering of human beings on the planet. There are more people. I was praying next to people from Russia and China and Mongolia and Korea. Every inch and corner of the globe were all around. And in the middle, in the heart of Mecca, when you're near the Kaaba, men and women, there's no beef. There's no like separation the way we obsess about it in the Muslim community. It was the most incredible, amazing experience. And the only thing I want to give you out of that is that literally, and you may not agree with me, but just hear what I'm saying. To understand the human experience, you have to understand Hajj. Every part of the globe is in this place. And so my lesson in that piece to you is find the places where you are the most uncomfortable, where you are the most different, and dive right in. Go to the places where you're not supposed to be if you're just be safe, right? Like, don't roll up into a Hell's Angels bar or whatever if you're not. But find those spaces where you might be uncomfortable and sweaty and difficult. The one main lesson from Hajj, what they say all throughout Hajj, if there's all these different rites that you have to go through, all these different things that you have to do, the number one thing they say all throughout it, what will ruin your Hajj will be to lose your patience. You have to maintain patience. In Arabic, it's sabr. It is the most critical element of Hajj. So that's another lesson for you is, where can you be more patient than you are right now? Where can you slow down a little bit and listen more than you speak? You guys still with me? Oh, yeah. That just gives you a little taste of what it's like. The ever-moving crowds around. It's an astonishing, astonishing sight. Absolutely astonishing. So I also wrote a book about Islam and the environment. It's called Green Deen, What Islam Teaches About Protecting the Planet. Deen means the path or the way. And I wrote it, let me think, how do I describe it? I wrote it at a time, I had been working with a lot of social justice movements, and I had been living in California, and I was actually, you guys know who Van Jones is? He's a pretty famous guy now. I was sort of in Van's orbit with a bunch of other people. They started an organization called Green for All. A lot of the green jobs language that went into I was part of that group of people that was creating a lot of that content. And when I was in those spaces as a person of faith, I kept running into this wall of like that the environmental movement was only speaking to secular people. And I was like, well, how do you translate these ideas to people who are of faith? And then I kept saying, well, you see amazing things in the Christian faith about it, amazing things in Buddhism and Judaism. Jain faith is incredible about environmental issues. But the Muslim community hadn't put out stuff. So what had been put out was things that were very scholarly. I wanted something that would speak to regular people. So I wrote about water, waste, energy, and food. And then I looked at principles within Islam and told stories about people that were using those principles to address and work in those issues. So really it's just a book of stories of people with some ideas layered in. It's been an incredible ride. This is the UK version. It's a much better version. British are way better at some of this stuff. And even, when they put the S's and things, it's just so much better. I don't know why we bastardized the English language. What did we do when we came over here? And then this is it was translated into Bahasa, which is the language in Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim country in the world. So it's been an interesting experience putting that together. But mainly what I wanted to share about this piece is that we are all translators, right? Every single person in this room, all of you are translators. That is your fundamental skill set. You take content and ideas that people need to understand, and you make sure that you translate them to the people around you. How many times have you been in a conversation and you had to say, let me make this simple and let me make this plain, right? Let me break this down. Let me say it to let me test it. I used to do something where I would test something on my mom, who would like barely pay attention to some of the stuff I was working on. I'd be like, Mommy, what about this? And she'd be like, I don't know. But if I got her, I got her. I used to do some radio on WNYC, which is the NPR in New York City. And I used to do sports commentary, on-air sports commentary. And my ultimate test for that was, if my mom is listening to this, is she going to get a tidbit of sports talking points that she can go to work and be like, hey, I know what's going on, right? Translation. The world needs more translators. Another way to think of that is the best translators of all time have been the poets. They've taken all the information and all the intuition and all the metaphors and ideas and fed them back to the people in a way that they could understand and they could sort of ingest it to a certain degree. So you are all poets. You are all translators. You should be writing poetry. I challenge you, before you go out to a difficult public meeting or any kind of meeting, write a quick little poem. Try and take the energy that you have that's churning up inside of you and turn it into something beautiful. That's the beautiful gift of language that we have. We all exist within an ecosystem, right? Our university is not just sort of out of context. There's a context. The context here is really fascinating. We spoke about is it Morel or Moral? Right? Moral. Who, you guys all know who that guy is, right? Land grant institution. Yeah, right, all that stuff. I only say it like that because in New York we have like all these not land grant institutions. It's just a very different dynamic. But I also think it's a really amazing sort of example of what the will of America can do. And I love the fact that he was Republican, one of the founders of the Republican Party. And he anchored institutions of learning with this is anchoring institutions of learning in place. So your job as translators are not only understanding the relationship between land, but also the relationship between the land and the people. The land, institution, and the people. It's an amazing mandate that you have. What is it? What is the phrase? Disciplina in civitatem, right? Education for citizenship. You guys your literally responsibility is to make sure that the students that come here and the community and everyone around it is prepared to actively be involved in our democracy. That's an amazing thing. Congratulations, you guys. You're winning. Straight up. You're not just going there to increase shareholder value. You're not just going there to dig a ditch. You're actually here for the most grand experiment that we've had in our existence. America is one of the most incredible experiments. The stuff in the Constitution is not, what do you call it? It's not like divine language. It's a challenge. It's like the guy on the porch. What? What are you going to do? Right? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to make something amazing happen? Or are you just going to let it lie fallow and just sit there? The beauty of this relationship between the land and the place and the people is that you literally have to think creatively about weaving those things together. And the implications of what happens with the land and the place and the people. So I want you to just, for a moment, you can do it or not do it, just pat yourself on the back every now and then. That's your to-do. Feel good about what you do. It's an honorable place in society. You make money helping human beings organize and govern themselves better. That's an honorable place. The only more honorable thing than that is what I was doing in New York City, making sure human beings get free access to clean water, because that is amazing. The ability to be able to say that that's what you do is absolutely amazing. I get really excited about that. So I will say this. One of the things that we need to do, because all of us exist within these networked places. How many task forces or networks are we all part of, right? Commissions. My challenge to you would be to refresh the button on them. Our networks need to evolve, right? You can't just sit in place. One practical/tactical thing. If there's a task force or a commission or a board that was set up to monitor some type of construction project or some type of effort that the community was doing, make sure that there's a clock on that thing. Make sure that there's a list of deliverables in that. Don't just have people out there meeting for no reason. Make sure they know what they're supposed to be doing and what they're supposed to be executing. Make sure that you drive them forward. I'll give you an example of this in New York City. Are you guys still with me? Even my people in the back, y'all are good? Great, sweet, love it. So there was a network of technologists in New York City. These are people that are coders and network people and hardware and software people that were really good at convincing you to buy stuff using ads and other things like that, but started to feel like they wanted to use their technology skills for good. So they created a conference called the Personal Democracy Forum that you should all go to. The Personal Democracy Forum has been around for 15, 16 years. So every year, it's called PDF. Every year, PDF would meet and bring together the best minds in social justice and organizing and activism and government and the private sector and the public sector. All the sectors come together to discuss the main issues, privacy and all these other issues that are coming up. Well, that network constantly evolved. And the way that it evolved most recently is that the network, and I'd say about 5 years ago, the network decided that we've been meeting so regularly that we need to have a place. So they created a co-working space called Civic Hall. Now, the framing around Civic Hall was basically, sometimes government needs competition. We have a lot of problems. Government is not going to be able to solve all of those problems. And the private sector is a little busy making money. We need other people to think in that other space. You guys are shepherds of that space to help people think about where can we solve problems and how can we pull minds together. And I'll give you an example of this. So I'll give you an example. The evolution of that. Hold on, I lost my thought. Oh yeah. So there's a group. So the Attorney General's office in New York recently sued all the big banks for what happened in the mortgage crisis. They took that money and the millions of dollars, and they gave it to cities in smaller cities in upstate New York that were most hard hit by the crisis. They then said, if you take this money, we'll give you money to create a digital platform to aggregate all of your data. Once you've aggregated that data, then you can start looking at the built environment more intentionally and connect. This is super wonky, but work with me for a second. Building code enforcement connected to community development. So what they call strategic code enforcement. So that you're starting to use your ability to understand the built environment to say, where do we need to put energy and resources and attention? What the city of Rochester did is that, and this was inspired by this work that happened out of the PDF and out of Civic Hall, city of Rochester took their data that they took from that situation and made it completely public. Absolutely, completely public. There's also all these other cities. There's 18 cities in this program. All the other cities are holding on to their data like this. But Rochester just turned it public facing. And they're like, you know what? We're going to deal with it as it comes. Because we know that our city needs to evolve, and we need to, this is like a kickstart for some of that evolution to happen. I'll give you another example of some of this evolution that needs to happen. And it's relevant. There's a company called Kuhn and Nagel. Has anyone ever heard of that? I would be really surprised. But you know what's crazy? 70,000 employees, international shipping and logistics firm, big things. If you want to get a big drill that's the size of this room, they can move it for you. Recently, they said, what do we need to do differently? Because there's a lot of other logistics firms. So they said, oh, customer service. Like, smile at people, be nice to people, talk to people, listen to people. So they're changing their entire corporate culture to be more of a customer service focus. Why? Because you're not going to be able to charge a premium if you don't treat people right. What these things illustrate also is not only do our networks need to evolve, but our institutions are evolving. Government, arguably, although it doesn't seem like that right now, government is probably better than it's ever been before in terms of listening. Our institutions have never had more of an exchange back and forth with the stakeholders, ever. So this is the best time to be doing this work in the history of this work, in the history of these institutions. You can completely transform the relationship that the Ohio State University has to the community. Absolutely, completely transform it. Not that it was bad. I don't know if it was bad or not, but I'm just saying in general that this is the moment for institutions to rethink what is their responsibility, what is their role. Part of that is transforming our institutions, is evolving our networks and pushing things forward. Another thing that they're finding, people need different skill sets. So I'll go back to that building code example. They were normally hiring building code inspectors that could, that build stuff. Plumbers, construction guys, tough guys. Then they found out when you're going to knock on a door of a grandma who's got 50 cats and garbage piled up, that construction guy doesn't have that thing. So you need people with different types of skills. You can teach people to look for where the problems are, but you need people who have an orientation towards service and towards human beings. So here's my push to you, is what skills do you need to learn as we're making this sort of adaptation and evolution away from sort of a closed institution to an open one? I'll give you, and this is one example of this in real time. So out of that network, the Civic Hall network, which also it incubates a lot of organizations, it became, because of that evolution, now just think about it, it was 15 years. Things are changing all around them. Because of that evolution, people with ideas came flocking to them. So we all know about, hold on, is everybody still with me? Is this getting boring? You're not really with me. You're not with me. He's like, I'm working with you though? I'll at least, okay, great, okay. So this is going to blow your mind. If you thought everything I said before was cool, this is going to blow your mind. So, and when you evolve your networks, you'll start to discover new ways for to be. So for example, we think of technology and smart cities as a very straightforward thing. The company goes in and builds up a bunch of stuff, it sucks a bunch of data from you, and they learn everything about you, and then they sell you things, right? That's the extractive model that we have for technology. So that's why a lot of us are driverless cars. I'm cool with that, right? We're not really that interested in driverless cars. You're like, who's driving it? This is a prime example of that. So a young man, African-American from Camden, New Jersey. If anybody knows anything about Camden, it's probably really bad. It's not the kind of place where brilliant geniuses come out of, but there are probably lots of there. This young man from Camden, New Jersey, African American. He grew up in a situation where he was, cool and smart. And so all the tough kids were like, we're going to protect him. So they wouldn't let him get involved in any dirt or any bad stuff that they did, and they just protected him. He ended up becoming a high-end bag maker, like Fendi and all these things, like fancy stuff. And eventually he started thinking about technology. He was really into gaming and stuff like that. He was playing with this, and this is really hilarious. He wanted to create a bodysuit that could teach you how to do kung fu, right? So you would be like in it, and it would teach you all these different moves. But then he was like, is that really needed? Like, what's the use case for that one? But then he met some blind folks. And because places like Civic Hall and conversations in the city are happening, because we've evolved our networks and pushed the conversation in the city so that technology in the city is not just about extraction, it's about what's the value and how can technology be used to save people's lives. So what he did, they created a device, which you see right here. It's called the Wayband. The Wayband is designed to give blind people the ability to walk around without having any tools. Like, it navigates you. And guess how he tested it? He put it on a blind man, and that blind man ran the New York City Marathon with this band on, successfully. When you start to shift your thinking about what is the use of something. So that's the challenge to you in some ways, too. And I'm going to give you another example right after this, but what is the role of your office? What is the role of the institution in the community? It might be one thing, but what is it going to be? Here's another one. In New York City, there's a law that says that a landlord has to provide heat in a building, right? Well, if a person brings that to court, there's no evidence that heat wasn't provided. So then most people don't bring that to court. It's very difficult to prove. So these two young hipster kids, nerdy kids, there's probably dozens of them on this campus, they created this thing called HeatSeek that plugs in and sends either through the Wi-Fi network or through the telephone network a readout of the heat and sends it to a centralized database. What it does is that it generates a report. So if you can pull out this report and you can bring it to housing court, now the landlords are just turning up the heat. They see the report, they just turn up the heat. This is technology that's being used to save lives. They're going to adapt this technology so that when climate change is an issue, and they're going to adapt this technology so that they can measure higher, when it's like 100 degrees or whatever, outside it might cool off at night, but inside it still stays hot. And people are dying. People are very vulnerable. Elderly, young people, they're dying. So they're going to use this in spaces in the city where urban heat island is a major situation, literally to save lives. So shifting the conversation around technology from extraction to a technology to save lives. Those are the things that get me excited. This shows you just all the stakeholders that are involved in that. That just gives you a sense that it literally changes the workflow for the people involved. So now I want to switch it and really challenge you a little bit. So this is where you have to be really honest with yourself. How are you doing in your engagement? Are you saying your voice needs and interests do not matter? Like, we don't really care about you, right? Most of New York, most of history, a lot of development, a lot of changes, a lot of roads were built, and they just said it's going to be built here, and too bad, right? So that's on the very low end. The next thing is we're going to keep you informed. We'll keep you informed. We'll keep you up to date, right? The next thing is we care what you think. This is on a spectrum, remember. So where are you at in this? And I want you to be honest about your work, because I worked in city government, and I will argue that there is no person in New York City better at being in front of a crowd of angry Jewish, black, and Puerto Rican folks than me. Like, you get an old Jewish grandma and old black grandma that are yelling at you about something, giving you specific, like, ppm 2.5, like they're giving you specific air quality things and asking you all this specific data. I'm telling you, seriously, that's how New York City folks are. You'll have someone in the back of the room that looks like a bum that then stands up and says and gives you some scientific thing. You're like, what the heck? We care what you think. We can't do this without you. Is that your stance? Is that your message to the community? We can't do this without you. Or is it, your leadership and your expertise are critical. We need you. And all the way at the other end of the spectrum, we want this to work, so we support democratic and equitable processes led by the community. Now, that might be too much for you. And it might be too much for some of the things that you're working on. But just keep in mind, where are you in this process? Where is most of your work happening? I think most of our work usually happens here and here. Okay, we're interested. I know when I was in city government, I worked in the Bloomberg administration. We often created these little axes and would say, these are the things that we want and that the people want. Boing. And then we're going to come out to the community and tell them, we learned it from you. May not be true, but it's really good storytelling. And that's useful, and that's important. Here's my challenge to you, though. You operate within this framework, but explain to them the constraints that you're existing within. The number one problem that happens most of the time when you're interacting with the public is that they don't know what you're thinking about. They don't know what your guardrails are. So when we were doing bike lanes in New York City, so the people who were focused on bike lanes went to the engineers and said, listen, tell us what is completely can't happen. Tell us what's 100% off the table, and then we'll design our program from there. What does that do? It builds relationship with those engineers. The engineers are like, we got your back. Okay, good. You're trying to do something really interesting here. You're trying to work with us. As opposed to, this is what's going to happen. The lane's going to go there. And where we're going to see this now in New York City, this is going to be the biggest, funniest fight. Amazon just decided they wanted to move to New York. People are not happy about that. Because they didn't go through any of the standard processes to talk to the community and listen to them and understand what was happening. So there's going to be lots of, and New York City people, we're pretty sensitive. We're like very sensitive people. And so it's true, we're very sensitive. And people are like, well, you didn't talk to me. You didn't come talk to me. Does that sound familiar? No one called me. I didn't get an invite. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, right now they're about to lose that battle. I want you to deepen your partnerships. The only way that you're going to transform. So the evolution of that place, Civic Hall. What's the evolution of Civic Hall now? Civic Hall just worked with a developer to purchase a piece of property or to lease a piece of property that's owned by the city to build a building on that place. So now it's gone from a network of people to a physical co-working space to now a building. And that building requires deep partnerships, deeper than we've ever had before. Because it's in a place that has schools, that has community organizations, tenant associations, businesses. So to even get that building approved, we had to do what's called a ULURP, which is a Uniform Land Review process. Basically, it had to go through every political layer of government in the city. So to do that, we had to develop what I like to call credible messengers. Are you guys familiar with this term? So developing credible messengers. In this context, it comes from, my understanding of it comes from, have you guys heard of the violence interrupters approach? There's a whole movement, this is going to blow your mind a little bit. There's a whole movement in urban spaces that says, you know what, cops, we'll take care of it ourselves, right? So I'll give you an example. There's two projects that are fighting each other, public housing developments. They're fighting each other. And this is a true story. One girl's walking home. She gets caught in a crossfire of a gang fight. She dies. She's a star basketball player. Tragic story. The kid who shot the person, he runs off. Now the whole entire community is on edge. It's like Romeo and Juliet. So they want to retaliate. They want to get back at him. So the violence interrupter approach says, who are the credible messengers within that community that can diffuse this conflict? Not call the police and have them come and arrest everybody. No, what they did was that everybody who was going to retaliate on the side of that young woman, they had their grandma, their aunt, just pull them into a room for like 48 hours and say, you're not leaving. And literally wait for the temperature to go down. Because usually that's when stupid stuff happens. You diffuse that moment, you stop it, you interrupt it, and then you kind of come together as a community. And what happened after that? The father of the slain girl and the mother of the shooter walked through the projects between everything together to show the community, no more killing. credible messengers. Who are the credible messengers in your community? The best public meeting you can have, the best public process you can have, the best engagement you can have is when you don't say anything. When you just sit back and your community members and the people that have your back say what you need to be said and you don't have to say anything. You agree or no? When you're just like, yes, it happened. I can't believe that so-and-so said that. And then you're like, amen. And you go home and sit by the fire and drink the hot chocolate and relax. So credible messengers. So here's a question. Who are your credible messengers? If you don't have them, you need to cultivate them. These are the people that you're going to need in times when you need, like, you're going to need them in specific critical moments. So for our ULERP process, how do we develop credible messengers? One of the things that I did is that I started walking the streets in the Lower East Side near this area, and I started talking to barbershop owners, ice cream shops, looking for people who grew up in the neighborhood, who started their own businesses in the neighborhood. And then we brought them to the city council. I didn't say anything to the city council when we were trying to get the approval of this. I literally sat in the back texting. Where are you at? Okay, great. You're up next. Okay, you're up next. Developing and cultivating those messengers so that they are the ones carrying the message, carrying the water up the mountain so that everybody knows that they're the ones doing the heavy lifting because it relates to them. It's important to them. So if you don't have the credible messengers in your community, cultivate them. And what's the best way to do that? You got to feed people. It's true. Have a brunch. I mean, we're in the Midwest. Have a pancake breakfast. You know what I mean? Do something basic. The basic things. That's what people want. People don't want frills. They want to know where the constraints are, and they want to know that you care about them. Just like you. They want to get hugs, but be careful. But, in general, people want hugs. And I want you to reflect on your own journey. Everyone here has their own journey that got them to this particular place. Everyone had to deal with ups and downs. I don't know, any of you guys, did anyone watch Days of Our Lives back in the day when Marlena was possessed by the devil? It was like the best thing ever. It was so hilarious. I'm like, this is a soap opera. And lately, I've been obsessed with this Turkish soap opera called Ertugrul. Anyone watch it? Anyone? Okay, fine, whatever. I don't watch a lot of TV, but man, this is what I realized about soap operas. Soap operas reflect life. Because even in the highest moments, and you'll notice, and you guys are going to do this after this, a telenovela too, there's telenovela watchers in here, I know there are, that the beauty of a soap opera is that whenever something good is happening, something evil or something bad is lurking in the corner. There's always something, it's never ending. You watch a good Marvel flick, and then you wait to the end and be like, man, I thought it was going to end. Like my son, you should have seen my sons when Black Panther got in Infinity War. Whew, that was rough. These are hard things to deal with. Life is like a soap opera, right? There's always these crazy up and downs, always something lurking and looming. My argument to you, what's lurking and looming right now is not lurking or looming. It's right up in our face. This slide is blank for a reason. In 2003, there was a blackout in New York City. Was anyone around during that blackout? You were there. It was an amazing moment. It was absolute darkness in the city. And this is still part of reflecting on your own journey and understanding what's lurking. It's coming. I'm going to tell you what's lurking, what's looming. In the midst of that blackout, to your point about Mayor Bloomberg, he brought together all his people and he said, what the heck just happened, first of all? And second of all, what's the next thing that could happen that we need to be prepared for? And this is just for you. I apologize for everyone else in the room. But he then put more money into our water infrastructure than any other government on the planet Earth. Like, that's governance. That to me is leadership for all of us. Making sure we all have water is really important. What's important in that is that Mayor Bloomberg then doubled down and said, we need to transform all of our infrastructure. Why? Because of that threat that's there now is climate change. And I want to just pause here for a moment and just go back to the blackout. In the midst of the blackout, I remember afterwards I went to the imam that I'm most connected to, and I said, and I'll say this to you, to the Ohio State University, if there was a blackout tomorrow, would Ohio State have light? And could you imagine that if in the midst of pitch darkness, there was brilliant light. And the only way that would happen is if we transformed our energy delivery system. The only way that would happen if to make this place a beacon of light in the midst of darkness was that if we completely transform how we manage water, waste, energy, and food. If the grid collapses, is it going to come back? If we lose all these resources, what are we going to do? So the challenge here would be, what can you do right now to make sure that Ohio State University becomes a beacon of light in the midst of darkness, in the midst of real, actual darkness? Not like theoretical, philosophical, but actual darkness. What needs to happen on this campus? And I guess we'll see some of that later in the conversation around sustainability and around our infrastructure. I went to Staten Island during that time. Here, I'll go back. I went to Staten Island during that time as a representative of city government. And I remember I sat down, I was going to talk about Mayor Bloomberg's Plan YC, which is the sustainability agenda for the city. That blueprint was then copied by cities all over the globe. There's now multiple networks and groups of people doing that. And I feel I have a great amount of pride that I was one of the people that worked on that document and worked on that effort. And I also have a great amount of pride that I was the only non-Ivy League educated person in that room. And my value to that room was because I was connected to communities. So they brought me into the conversation. They said, because we lost congestion pricing, and we lost congestion pricing because grandmas that talked to elected officials were telling them no. So we want to talk to grandmas. And I was like, you didn't talk to any grandmas. You didn't talk to the church ladies. What are you doing? Because they're relevant in New York City too. They were like, well, we were just right. Well, you know what else is right? The number one thing you can do to stop climate change is stop eating meat. Are we going to do that tomorrow? No. That's not going to happen like that. It might be the right thing, but how do you move it forward? So I went to Staten Island, and this this older gentleman in the community groups, they sat down and said, before you start talking, we want to let you know we don't believe in climate change. I was like, okay, that's fair. They're like, so you can say whatever you want to say, but we don't believe in climate change. And I was like, interesting. What about, have you had more days over 90 degrees? They're like, oh yeah, we've had days over 90 degrees. It's getting hotter and hotter, yeah. I was like, sea level rise? They're like, oh my God, yeah, sea level rise. And they're telling me all these stories. Like, all right, you don't have to believe in climate change. Call it whatever you want. So I'm going to say that to the room right now. Call it whatever you want. Something is happening. And it's happening serious. And that's what's looming in our thing. I got involved in this conversation around green jobs, the conversation around sustainability, the conversation around environmentalism. These are all great tag words. I call it an aspect of being human, and fundamentally, about solving persistent human problems. How are we going to get water, clean water, to drink? Where are we going to, after you go to the bathroom, where is that going to go? If you've been camping, you dig a ditch, you poop in the ditch, you cover it over, and you walk out with your stuff. It's kind of gross when you talk about it, but when you're camping, it's great. Leave no trace. I used to work for Outward Bound, and we were focused on leaving no trace. How are you going to have light and energy? Building roads. These are things, and I'm just going to say it, these are things that human beings have been thinking about since our beginning. They're not new. So when you call them things like environmentalism and sustainability, you're really throwing dirty words at them. The question I have for you is, how can we do all of those basic persistent human problems? How do we solve them better than we've ever done before? 100 years ago, you had lakes of oil spewing out of the ground in Texas. You had people in rowboats in like the 1890s rowing around lakes of oil. Okay, a combustion engine is a great idea in 1895. Brilliant. But in 2019, not so much. If you have to go into the ground and frack and destroy our water supply, find another idea, find another way. If you have to destroy the Arctic wilderness just to get a little bit, find another way. We are human beings. We're human beings. This is what we do. Our fundamental thing is we constantly do things better than we've ever done before. That's the question. Are we doing things better than we have ever done before? What is the best way to get energy? The best way to get water? What is the best way to do this work? That's just work. In the old days, you'd be like, I need water. Okay, go down, go get the water. I need energy. I'll chop down that tree. It's work. This is what human beings have gotten. It's work. So my question to you is, what is our shared narrative? And I'm going to start to close here. We're getting close to the end. All right, good. I'm going to wrap it up, and it'll be nice and tight. Am I overtime yet? Dang, okay, I'll speed it up. Are you guys offended by that? Okay, just checking. So religion, science, politics, culture, what are they telling us? It's the end of the world. Right? Think about it. Culture, there's all these movies about the end of the world. Politics, well, we see what's going on. Science is climate change. Right? I used to say in 2008, I would say that Republicans want us to be afraid about terrorism, and Democrats want us to be afraid about climate change. They're still using fear to motivate us. It's not a different thing, but it's all fear. And religion's got a long history of telling us about the end of the world. And I think it's a narrative of transition. I think we're in a situation where we're moving from an era of extraction to an era of regeneration. That we're extracting things from the ground, we're extracting things from human beings, we're extracting data, where everything is about taking and taking and taking, and that we're shifting into an era of regeneration where we're going to heal the land. And in parts of Jordan where land has been destroyed by war, they're literally using permaculture to heal scarred earth. That's the language that they're using at the state level. In Yemen right now, even there's bombs going on in Yemen, but there's also people in Yemen that are using permaculture techniques to rehabilitate the land and make more soil arable. That's happening right now, right? This idea of regeneration. So I say that's in the future. Right now, we're in the space in between. That's the narrative of transition. The problem is that we don't necessarily know language to describe all these terrible things, so we just call it the end of the world. But I argue that our children, they're going to have a great life, inshallah, God willing, because they're going to figure out how to find value from healing the earth, from healing human beings, from nurturing people and bringing people together. That's your charge. So the question is, what's your role in this transition? Your role individually, your skills, where you've come from, your grandparents, what they've taught you, your aunts and uncles, your neighbors, the people that love you, the people you love. What's your role to them? As a teacher, what are you teaching your students? As a student, what are you learning and what are you trying to learn? What's your role in this transition? And then what's the role of the Ohio State University in the heart of it all? What's your role as a university in this transition? My argument is that you should be a beacon of light. The Ohio State University should be completely off the grid. Should invite people from every corner of the globe. There should be learners of every language here. There should be ways to understand every culture here. That's your challenge in this transition if we want to regenerate and heal. So here's some inspiration and final thoughts. Am I still okay? Okay. Okay. Just final thoughts. David Brooks. Anybody ever read David Brooks? You know him. That's your homie. That's your buddy. You guys hang out by the fire. He said, the core American idea is not the fortress, it's the frontier. First, we thrive by exploring a physical frontier during migration west, which had a lot of issues. Just want to point that out. And now we explore technological, scientific, social, and human frontiers. The core American attitude has been looking hopefully to the future, not looking resentfully towards some receding greatness. We are not about the past. We have never been about the past. We are a people about the future. He said, the hardship of the frontier calls for energy, youthfulness, labor, and these have always been the nation's defining traits. It requires individualism and hard work, disciplined individuals. So the people who come from this framework and this identity, David Brooks is speaking about really the root of the Republican ideas. I want to just pull our Republicans in Congress right now and say, please, it's not about building walls. It's about finding the next edge and connecting people. It's not about building a fortress. It's not about being tribal. It's about extending and connecting. And obviously staying true to your values. And also, in your worlds right now, there might be some nuances, and these are just my final points. These two sisters, they're starting a whole movement of black folks that are going back to the land. There's a whole huge back to the earth, back to the land movement. Some of these people might be your students. And hopefully they will be. We don't need more density. This is me from New York City saying this. We need people to go and make the world healthy and fertile and verdant. We need more movements like this. So if you have a student, this is my challenge to all millennials. Go work on a farm for 6 months, 6 to 9 months. That's your blind spot. These kids have no idea, no connection to the natural world. Just go. Work on a farm for 9 months. You're 22 years old. You come back, that'll be your job when you come back. 9 months. What's 9 months? So go work on a farm. If you're a student here, go work on a farm. Go work on the ocean. So yeah, they started the older sister is to the left, and she has a farm way up near Troy, New York, and her younger sister down below, and they have vibrant, productive farms that are feeding people and creating a refuge for other folks. These are women in Kenya. They have this, anyone heard of these friendship benches? When you talk about place, in your relationship to place, and your elders in your community. These elders in the community, noticing there's a lack of healthcare providers for mental health support. So they said to the grandmas, they've seen a lot. So they, at certain times, they sit at these friendship benches, and people in the community know you can go sit there and just tell them your problems. You should have friendship benches all over Ohio State University. You should have the elders from the community coming in and saying, hey, you need some help? You need to talk to somebody? I got you. People would fall over themselves to do that because people want to support each other. And find little incisions in our laws that don't make sense. Today, Van Jones, oddly enough, launched this thing called Reform, where they're really thinking about what are those weird technical issues in government and policy that are making it difficult for people to be home. Well, bail is not fair. How was Harvey Weinstein hanging out of jail? Slimy guy like him. But have you heard of Khalif Browder? He was a young man who was arrested for stealing something, but he actually didn't do it. They put him in solitary confinement for 2 years. His bail was $1,000. His family didn't have $1,000 to get him out of jail. He came out and he killed himself. And then a month later, his mother killed herself. We don't need bail the way that's set up like that. So there was an effort in New York City, and that's my oldest son coming out of that thing. There was an effort in New York City to say, let's bail out all the women and bail out all the minors from Rikers. You know, people who had done certain types of offenses, why are they in jail? Because some people go to jail and then they miss their job, and then they're back in this terrible loop again. So the question is, where are the technical rules in your bureaucracy that don't actually make sense now? That you can make a decision, that you can push and you can pull them and say, we can transform people's lives if we address this little issue. That requires listening to your people. You may not have even asked them this question. The students, the community members, ask them, what makes it difficult to be here? What makes it difficult to be present? How can I help you? You might find out something amazing. They'll be like, oh, we can do that tomorrow. That's administrative. I can wipe that off the books tomorrow. Yep. And then here we go. Last point. So there's a building in Seattle called the Bullitt Center. The Bullitt Center is the only building in the world that has a composting toilet system up to 6 floors. It's completely off the grid. In the future, 100 years from now, we're going to be looking back and saying, we used to use clean water to poop in? What were we thinking? So, just like in the midst of the Civil War, the Union was at its lowest point ever. You guys probably already know this story. They created the land-grant colleges, the land-grant institutions, and they created the future, literally the blueprint to build for the future. Right now, we already know the blueprint for the future. We need to invest in those ideas now. It might seem dire, but in the most dire moments is when we have to be our best. Thank you.
So we're going to have to end it here, but I'm sure Ibrahim would love to take a few questions from people down front after. So I hope you've enjoyed today's conference. I hope you've learned a lot of things and made a lot of new connections so that you can be better shepherds of networks and develop more meaningful partnerships and making a real difference in the community. We have another full day tomorrow. And so I hope you will regenerate yourself tonight and be back tomorrow early, 8 o'clock, and raring to go for another day. Thanks again. Good evening. Join me again in thanking Ibrahim for his talk.